Okay, so one of our viewers mentioned if we could explain really briefly what we do for our paint gun settings. I would like to note that we are by no means professional painters, and we use camouflage matte paint, and the process of applying like automotive high gloss etc. is very different, I would imagine. So I'm going to show you what we do here, and there's obviously several ways you can do it. There's plenty of right ways, there's a wrong way, so I'm going to show you a few different things and how I prefer to set a paint gun. So typically a paint gun has 4 different settings, and depending on which brand you buy, the manual will help you see which that is. But for this one, you have an airflow setting, then you have your paint spread pattern. In other words, it'll control a pinpoint or a wide spray. You have your paint flow at the back here. And then at the front here, you can set whether the paint sprays out vertically or horizontally. Horizontally or vertically, you would just twist this depending on which way you're going to spray. And first, I'll show you a couple of settings and what they look like in terms of what you don't want. So, for example, now, before you get started, you obviously want correct PPE. But so you guys can hear me, I'm going to demonstrate that real quick without it. So first would be, let's go with too much paint. So what that's going to look like is when you hit your surface, you can already see here, it's very high gloss, and you'll begin to see what we call running. So that's an example of way too much paint flow adjusted on your gun. The next one would be too much air. So if we open your airflow right up, that's what it's going to look like. It might apply on the job, not too bad, but you can see all the overspray going everywhere. What's going to happen is you're going to cover the shop with overspray over everything. And then depending on the weather and whatnot, the high airflow, what's going to happen is the paint droplets are going to come out at such a velocity that those paint particles, the outside layer, will actually begin to dry before it hits the surface, and the end product will look like, you'll see a painted surface, but it'll look like sand, particles of sand all over the surface, and you'll literally be able to brush it off. That's all those paint particles that dried before they hit the surface. And then now what I'm going to do is show you how I like to set it to get the correct way. So what I'll do is I'll turn the air almost off completely and then open it just a touch until we get a nice subtle airflow like that. Then I'll adjust my paint flow till it's basically off. So you won't even see paint coming out of here. Then I'll open it a little bit. And then as far as my needle, I'll turn it all the way to a pinpoint needle spray, and then I'll open it just a little bit. And then I usually like to find a test area before I hit the actual job. So I'm going to come over here. So now you can see there's almost no paint coming out, but that's a good airflow. Like, I'm happy with that. That's not too high of an airflow. So I'm going to gradually open the paint until that's almost there. And you get nice even coverage like that. So I'm happy with that. So with the matte paints, you'll want to apply it a nice, pretty solid coat. And what you don't want is, you'll get what's called tiger striping. So if I apply a coat and then I have the needle nose too much, what you'll see is as you do the job, you'll see gaps in the surface. And that might not be evident initially, but once it dries, you'll see that. So to prevent that, you want to move away from pinpoint just a little bit and then overflow your last pass like this. And that'll allow nice even coverage. And then when that dries, we don't have any runs. We don't have the high airflow that creates that sand grain look. And basically, yeah, that's how we set up our gun and we paint our tanks. All right, so one thing to note with paint guns, it's about creating that perfect balance of airflow, paint flow, and pattern. Just remember that once you set your airflow and your paint flow, the moment you change your dial pattern, it's going to throw these settings out. So There's different applications for using a pinpoint or a wide spray, but just remember every time you change this setting, you're going to have to readjust these two. One other tip I'll show you guys is every once in a while I do get runs. I will mess it up. A quick way to fix that, and I'm going to show you now. Carry a clean rag in your pocket, and let's say we go a little too heavy one time and we see a run forming like that. You can see that happening right now. Just grab your rag and just dab the run section. Okay, and then that is a little too heavy, but let the run kind of dry a little bit, and with luck, your next pass over that dry area, it will hide any of the discoloration and you'll get a nice full coat again. Sometimes that'll get you out of having to strip the whole thing down, back to bare metal and starting again. Most of the time we can get away with it. But again, those high gloss paints behave very differently. So this is basically matte paint, camouflage paint. So I want to show everyone another technique here that's applicable for painting camouflage paint. It depends on the type of vehicle you're doing and which country and what era it was used in, but typically when you apply camouflage spray, you want to avoid really sharp edges. So what do I mean by this? I'm going to show you an example of a sharp edge. So I would set my gun to like needlepoint spray. Turn that down a little bit. A very sharp edge would be, so when that dries, it's a there's very little blended area, and most vehicles that have camouflage paint, it's more blended. So the way to achieve that is you get away from that needle nose point and give yourself a nice wide fan spray and start in the center of your pattern and then just gradually work out of it. And now if you go in close to that, you can see it gets full color and then it sort of fades away into the green. So typically on aircraft and tanks, you'll see more of a fade through the difference of colors.